I mean, I read the Genesis account as being that Adam was created male and female was created out of him. And there's a very sharp, dare I say, binary distinction between the two. I mean, I think it's just pretty clear in the text, and I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone suggest that Adam was androgynous, was a mixture of male and female. So
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Vast Podcast. I am here with David Campbell. David, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
And we're joined by Michael, and today is a Q&A episode.
Absolutely. We got some questions on gender. So we've been rolling through some Q&A over the last couple of weeks. And basically, a few questions came in around gender. So I'm going to just read three of them really quickly, and then hopefully that can just launch you two on some responses to God's view on gender. So question one was the first person created androgynous? The second question was, how does the six genders of the Hebrew language align with our view of binary genders? And the other question was, does Genesis 1:27 outline genders as being binary? So there's a couple of questions, few questions, all kind of wrapped up in that, but all heading to the same place. All right, what do you guys think? I didn't even know that there were six genders of the Hebrew language.
But neither did I, and I spent several years studying Hebrew, so I'm from. But they're definitely.
So that's fake news. That's just fake news right off the bat, that there is no six genders of the Hebrew language.
That's correct. There's definitely a masculine and feminine. English is not really a gendered language, but a lot of languages are. They usually have masculine, feminine, and neuter, as in Greek and Latin. And Hebrew certainly has a masculine and feminine. And as to the question about androgynous, that means male and female. I mean, someone that has a mixture of the two sexual organs. Um, I mean, I read the Genesis account as being that Adam was created male and female was created out of him. And there's a very sharp, dare I say, binary distinction between the two. I mean, I think it's just pretty clear in the text, and I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone suggest that Adam was androgynous, was a mixture of male and female. So, uh, you know, I what you can take out of the text, and I don't know where the questioner is coming from. That's what I'm trying to say. The questioner, the person that asked this question, may have been reading something in Jewish theology or something like that. Maybe there's a mystically oriented rabbi at some point that made that, suggestion. But that's not in the Hebrew text, and certainly wouldn't be mainstream theology in Judaism or Christianity, to say the least. And I've never heard. That's the first time I've heard of it. So that's really about the best I've got to say about that.
I'm just trying to think if there would have been anything in Moses's worldview that, like, would it even be conceivable for him to have it in his mind that the first man should be thought of and put forward as an androgynous person. I'm not saying that, people thousands of years ago weren't born, in as a hermaphrodite, I suppose. Is that a synonym?
I mean, is this simply them asking, like, Genesis 1:17, referring to God created man in his own image, in the image of God he created him, male and female he created them,
right?
And God blessed them.
Right.
Like, is someone just asking that because they're using the them pronoun?
Like they, them?
Maybe.
Oh gosh, no.
Well, that's reading something bizarre into the Bible there.
I think that may be what they're asking.
Well, in which case, that's a misunderstanding of the Hebrew text, definitely. So the text is saying that God created a man and woman, and that is the plural in the English language of two or more individuals. So that's all that's saying. Um, uh, so
Yeah, it
there,
would seem silly to read anything else into that scripture than simply God created male and female.
Well, it's reading our postmodern view of gender into an ancient text, which is something that we absolutely should not be doing. It's what do you call it? Eisegesis instead of exegesis.
yeah, on a grand scale. So what was the third question? I mean, the six genders. I've never heard of that. I'll have to Google that and see where some of these came from. But
The
Let me see if I can look it
the
up.
last question basically just informed the first one, which was just, does Genesis 1:27 outline genders as being binary? Which I think it would seem like any reading of that scripture that comes to any other conclusion other than that would need a bunch of hoops jumped through to come to any kind of conclusion, and just straight up dishonesty, right? I mean, that would seemingly be what I would read into it.
I think it's worth saying at this point in the discussion that um, the current, conversation around gender being a construct of language, and you can be whatever gender you want. You can identify whatever way is a to say that realization would be the understatement of the century. I mean, no one in human history has ever believed that. Up until this development of extreme versions of critical theory in recent years, which comes out of uh, deconstructionist philosophy of some French guys back in the 1960s. In language, their philosophy of language, and I don't even think they would have seen it taking this direction. Um, One of the things that you have to understand about current postmodernism is that it's completely divorced even from its founders of 50 years ago. It's taken some very weird directions. Um, but we have to keep you know, pinching ourselves to say and reminding ourselves and reminding other people that this is a realization that no one has ever believed in all human history, and still doesn't believe except in certain weird academic departments of liberal universities, and followers of those kind of people.
Yes. So I found these 6 Jewish terms straight from Wikipedia, an article about gender and Judaism, which says is a radical emerging subfield at the intersection of gender studies and Jewish studies.
Oh well, now
Gender.
Mm.
how dare that?
There you go. There's your critical theory for you. Gender studies centers on the interdisciplinary research on the phenomenon of gender. It focuses on cultural representations of gender in people's lived experience. Okay, so we're automatically not doing theology here. We're doing gender studies. But here are the terms, and I'm going to botch the pronunciation of these. Zakar, which is usually translated as male in English. Nekeva, which is usually translated as female. Androgynos, which is a person who has both male and female physical sexual characteristics. 149 references in the Mishnah and
Okay,
Talmud.
just a moment, please. That's not correct, because androgynous is a Greek word. There's no Greek in the Mishnah.
You're saying that the word androgynos is not Hebrew.
No, no. Aner is the um, Greek word for man, and gune, from which we get gynecological, for instance, is the Greek word for women. And so when you put and andros is the haven't got time to explain Greek grammar, but it's the genitive case of aner. So andros is a form of the noun for man. So androgynos, that's the joining together of male and female. So if someone is androgynous, there's a mix between male and female. But that is the Mishnah was not. Let me assure you, was not written in Greek. So that is some. That's four Pinocchios to that person right away.
And also, this is saying 149 references in Mishnah and Talmud in the 1st to the 8th centuries CE.
Yes.
Is
Well,
that
that's
uh, what does CE stand for?
That's AD. It's
I was
the
gonna say that's AD, right?
it
So we're
stands
not even
for
talking about
common era is what it stands
right
for.
common era.
Yes, AD is Anno Domini. It's a Christian terminology. So Jewish a person, or if you're trying to work Christians and Jews together, you would say B before the Common Era or CE the Common Era.
Right.
That
And so is it possible that this term androgynous is appearing in some kind of like Greek translation of the Mishnah or the Talmud? The point I'm making is that this is not ancient Hebrew thought. This is like post Christ, probably more liberal Jewish thought.
most likely, or there could have been, there were Jewish communities that wrote literature in Greek because in the diaspora, they were in Egypt and they were in Turkey and present day Turkey and just about everywhere. So there is Jewish literature that was written in Greek. Um, and it tended to mix with Greek culture and the Greek gods. There was androgynous elements in there, and so, I don't know. I mean, it's possible that there were Jewish people mixing, Greek mythology as aspects of Judaism, but that's way off on the fringe. That's not talking. Not that
We're not talking about Orthodox Judaism here.
is in the Hebrew language or six genders is ludicrous.
Right.
There,
Well, let's keep going. The next one, I don't know how to say this. I'm gonna call it tum tum. TUMT, which I clicked on. This one has a link to another Wikipedia article, and it's a term that appears in Jewish rabbinic literature. So again, we're not, and this is also from the uh, let's see, 181 references in Mishnah and Talmud, 335 in classical midrash and Jewish law codes. Rabbi Meir contrasts it with androgynous, saying it is not a unique creation. Is not a unique creation. Quote: sometimes a man and sometimes a woman. So
I don't know uh, it's possible that the rabbi is commenting on. I mean, it was well known in
he lived in the 2nd century.
in antiquity. There were hermaphrodites.
Right, and that's kind of the point I was going back to earlier. Even with Moses, like people are born with all kinds of physical qualities, even though it's rare. It's not just a modern day phenomenon. So just because they're recognizing the existence of this does not, and they may have been affirming, 6 genders or whatever, but
No, well, I think that's highly unlikely.
same. It's and if they were, certainly not uh, with the same approach that we currently are doing in the
No,
West with
it's
gender studies.
totally different. It's a postmodernism as its roots in French philosophy. It has nothing to do with classical Judaism, and you're to say that you're comparing apples and oranges would be an understatement.
Right. The last one is the word saris, which I'm probably botching. A male who does not develop at puberty and or subsequently has their sexual organs removed. So I guess some kind of eunuch. And I guess that maybe connects to what Jesus said. Some are born eunuchs, some are eunuchs by choice, and some are made eunuchs.
We're talking about extremely rare conditions of biology. If you went to the same people that were commenting on that and asked, "Do you believe that there are two genders, male and female?" they would say, of course, be you out of your mind? Um, and I don't know the context of this, but they're obviously Jewish rabbinical law was very particular about uh, the covenant, the male, the circumcision, all the rest of it. So there may have been particular cases where they thought, what are we supposed to do with somebody whose sexual organs are properly developed? Are they allowed in a man's side of the thing, or of the they allowed as men into the membership in the synagogue and so on, or not. But the context of that discussion is on the assumption that there are two genders and that this is something that's out of order. It's something extremely rare. It's out of order, and how do we deal with it? It's totally intellectually dishonest, to say the least, to then say, oh, there's all, the rabbis actually were very postmodern. The men were going into the ladies' rooms and vice versa, all the rest. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous.
In
So,
Matthew 19, obviously, this is the text that
eight
people point to a
Pinocchios
lot.
now we're up to.
So many Pinocchios. In Matthew 19, Jesus talking about divorce affirms that in the beginning, God made us male and female to be joined together.
That was Jesus of Genesis, and I'm going with it.
Yes.
Great. Okay, we got one more. That was great. I got one more question for you guys, and then we're going to record some toxic theology that will be out for another episode. And this is a quick, snappy response. So each of you has only 30 seconds to respond to this question. What are your thoughts on the Catholic view of denying communion to believers in sin?
Well, I think that's up to the Catholics to decide. I mean, the biblical record is simply, if you're, not right with your brother, then don't come to the Lord's table, or you may get into trouble.
My 30-second response is I think that the Catholics have been historically much better at communion than Protestants. So I'm going to defer to the Catholics. And as someone who was raised charismatic, I think I can learn a lot from their approach to.
So are you saying that someone should be denied communion?
I think that only believers should take communion. I don't know about whether or not somebody is, I guess if they're unrepentant of their sin, then that's coming to the Lord's table in an unworthy manner.
My dad was raised in the Brethren, the Plymouth Brethren, and if the elders knew that there were people within the congregation that were not in good relationship with one another, none of them were allowed to come to the Lord's table until they got right with each other.
Right. It's not just a Catholic thing. It is indeed a biblical thing to have some measures in place around taking communion. This is exactly what Paul speaks to in 1 Corinthians. It is possible to abuse the Lord's Supper. And I think that's one area where Protestants were, our charismatic evangelical stream have missed it. And so when we take communion at church, we say, if you are a Christian, if you are a believer, join us. And we could, maybe stand to be a little bit more specific. I don't know.